I don't think I need to argue about the influence of anime and how important it is to both Western and Eastern pop culture. However, one of the most influential animes is probably Initial D in my opinion. It's a lot up there with like the big three, and it's undoubtedly become an icon for Japanese cars and underground street racing and drifting in general. But why? What made it so special? Why is this specific anime so special and leave an impact on pop culture and car culture? Well, today we're going to explore that and understand what made Initial D so special. Well, let's first get an understanding of Initial D. What is Initial D? Well, put simply, it's a racing anime slash manga, I guess, or movie, I guess, if you count those as well. If you don't know what it is, you should just try watching it. It's really good in my opinion. Basically started out as a manga. We follow someone named Takumi Fujiwara, very skilled drift racer. He's in high school. He mostly drove to deliver tofu, but would slowly get into street racing as he kind of just got more and more into it. You know, his friends got him into it, and then he would get more. It's kind of like one of those, I guess, feel-good movies in a way, because it like, oh, you know, we're all in it together. Anyways, there's a lot of drama, racing, car nerdy stuff, and Eurobeat. It had about 6 or so seasons, and then they had some spin-offs as well. Then had a remake and a movie, and I think the remake looks fantastic. And unlike a lot of racing things and mangas, this one focused on like the technicality of racing and honestly was pretty realistic mostly. We'll talk more about that later. It also had a lot of Japanese cars. Almost every single one was a Japanese car, ranging from the RX-7 to Honda Civic, Toyota 886 is that's like the one that everyone knows. And you know, we'll talk more about those later, but you get the general idea. So, what made this stand out so much? I feel like the first thing I really want to talk about is honestly the art style. This is both from an age perspective, art perspective, and animation perspective. Now, if you know anything about like old animes from the 90s and 80s, they have this very fascinatingly nostalgic feel, even if you never grew up with it. It has this feeling of almost opening up like an old comic book and that old comic book smell. And you know, that same feel is there for Initial D, and especially in stage 1. And if you've ever watched the first stage, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. It feels very old, but in this good way as well. And I think it especially kind of like hones in on the art here. It's very unique, especially from like comparing it to like modern anime. It has this very unique feel, kind of like Mob Psycho. If you've ever seen Mob Psycho, it has this very cartoonish look, and I think Initial D kind of has this unique cartoonish look in the same way, and it also depicts characters more realistically. I think the best examples are Takumi. You know, he's the main character, and usually we portrayed main characters like the hot, cute boy that everyone's after, but he's just kind of like average. I mean, he looks very normal. He's very, I think it captures his essence very well. He's very spacey, things like that. Or Mogi, you know, she's like the love, I guess, interest for a little bit, and then Mercedes, but she looks pretty, but like she's normal as well. She looks cute, and you know, but she's still normal. She isn't like this glorified character as well. And I feel like it's such a unique art style, and this old feeling, this old factor, this nostalgic factor perpetuates it. And I don't think, as I mentioned earlier, like I think it's really important how well like characters are captured. And I think again, Takumi and almost every character is captured in this amazing way here. You know, he looks so spacey, carefree, but not in that like super cute or hot way. Rather, he just looks, again, very normal. Or the guy who drives the, you know, R32, I forgot his name already. Nakazato, I believe. Yeah, he's drawn in this very honorable way. He gives off this very honorable feel. Bunta, you know, very normal despite being like this god tier racer, kind of like how real people are. You know, you don't see a person on the street and go, oh, that's like a god tier racer. You know, but you can kind of just see like he's a normal person, but he's got like an interesting past. And I just think it just makes characters stand out very well, and I just really like the art style. Another thing I really wanted to talk about as well is the animation, which, I mean, it's mostly about the CGI. If you've ever seen Initial D Stage 1 and compared to like the later stages and the absolutely beautiful remake, it looks very old, but it has this like very nice charm to it. Because remember, this is like the peak of animation back then. This was like peak animation, and it had to be animated and rendered, and then it had to like do all this sort of stuff. And seeing these like low-res Gmod cars drift, which is animated and shot decently well actually, just further adds to this feeling of like looking back at the past, and it's also just very impressive for the time. And they did this, I think it was still like done in this very unique way though. I still really like how they did it, and I really love the later stuff they would do later on in stage 4 and stage 5, where they made it look more anime and made it look more, there was this more cell shady look. I think cars were outlined more, and then they added these like very unique like effects, almost like if you ever watched the death battle between the R32 and the, I believe it's the FC, it has like, you know, there's like all these cool effects and stuff they do. Or like the insanely beautiful part in the final stage where they have like these really cool wings, and it's like, I see it now, I see it. And I just really love how it looks. And then there's finally the legend stage, which really plays with this manga and more hand-drawn feel. They still use CGI, I'm pretty sure, to like trace over it, but it gives this very unique feel that you're almost like reading it. It's like reading an animation. I don't know how to put it, but they utilize like lower frame rate, and then they add all these little art lines that make the cars like look like they're being drawn. If you've ever seen the actual manga, it looks kind of like that. And so I really like how Legend kind of brings to life this manga feel, and it's such a unique thing. And I think it looks absolutely phenomenal, and I think it's the best the series has ever gone, hands down. Now, the next thing is also the depiction of driving in actual racing, and especially underground racing as well. If you look at the way most shows and movies show racing, it comes across as very fantastical and very crazy. I mean, look at Fast and Furious. Even the old ones were like, I'm gonna use my nitro all over the place. Oof, I'm noxing like, and then like the G-forces, and then they're gonna be like, okay, I'm going 300 miles per hour. I'm gonna just use my e-brakes and just ruin my tires, and they just freaking blow up their car or whatever. And you get the idea. Now, here's the problem with driving and racing. I don't know much else than it's realistic. I don't know much about. I'm not much of a car expert, you know. Oh my gosh, I wish there was like someone who could actually give me things I knew about things about cars and driving and realistic. What's this feeling? What's this music? It can't be! MSV Idios! That's right, I got my good friend MSV to explain a bunch of car stuff and a bunch of driving tactics and Initial D in great detail, and it's extremely interesting to hear him talk about cars, and so I just hope you guys really enjoy this little bit. It's like really long, but it's very interesting, so please give it up for MSV Idios. He didn't do a good transition, so he's probably just going to start off by talking into a script. Anyways, please give it up for MSV Idios.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Now, Initial D's popularity among the media is somewhat attributed to the racing scene of the anime. Many scenes that made it popular show the cars charging down a tight toge road, performing realistic maneuvers, while the drivers monologue their thoughts. Oftentimes, characters are seen using racing tactics to overtake their opponents or gain the upper advantage. Some of these tactics include like the blind attack, the gutter run, the kansei drifto, and the arahazuka jump. Now, many of these are actually based on the toge scene in Japan, which draws inspiration from real-life, street, and professional racing tactics, hence why they appear realistic, although they're sometimes exaggerated or simplified to appeal to a broader audience. In addition, the tactics are also representative of the culture around the time of each anime episode. Earlier episodes are more exaggerated and feature more drifting, which was during the time when drifting and toge were new and popular, while later episodes are more tuned down during the time when realism started becoming more popular in movies and anime. Also, I know Neko's gonna talk about MF Ghost later in the video, but I just want to say subjectively, I think MF Ghost holds a candle to Initial D, just in a different light. Okay? Initial D is more about illegal street racing, while MF Ghost is more about legally sanctioned racing. Okay, it just takes a bit more knowledge about how real races work to understand.
I didn't read your script. Did you really get the whole part about MF Ghost?
Since it doesn't make it, you need to use a little bit. You just have a little bit more knowledge about how real races work.
You know the later part. I'm not even gonna be like. I'm not even gonna be shitting on MF Ghost. I'm just gonna say like I don't like the lack of. I just feel like it's a lot. It's more meh because its story is okay and the Eurobeat just doesn't feel the same. That's okay, for later. Don't finish again. Don't finish reading.
I just want to say it's in my opinion I think it's as good as Initial D.
Okay. Now go read.
All right, now let's take a look at what is arguably the most popular scene from Initial D.
言わんこっちゃねえ。スピードが乗りすぎてるぜ。立て直して減速するスペースはもうねえ。完成ドリフト。
This is a Kansei Drifto. Now, as we can see, Takumi overtakes Kyosuke on a gentle right corner by refusing to slow down. However, after the right corner, there's a sharp left corner. Kyosuke predicts that Takumi is going to crash unless he starts braking during the right-handed corner, but instead of slowing down, Takumi kicks the car out to the right before quickly swinging it to the left. This motion sets his car up for a drift for a sharp corner, which Takumi executes without crashing. Now, this scene is obviously famous because of its meme status, but the maneuver that Takumi does is called the Scandinavian flick, or pendulum turn. Both terms are interchangeable. This is common in rally and ice rally where the traction level is low. And yes, I will be using BeamNG as a demonstration. So let's take a look at this corner. So this is the part where I think I'm supposed to send you clips of me and BeamNG.
Yeah, it's probably playing on the screen right now.
It's similar to the one seen in Initial D, where there's a gentle corner followed by a sharp corner in the opposite direction. So if you drive it normally, it will require heavy braking before turning the car. Because the car's grip is limited, and most of the grip being put into braking, it can't turn as much. So the braking has to be done first before the turning. Additionally, since it is on dirt, grip is really low, so all of the braking has to be done. When doing the Scandinavian flick, the car isn't braking as hard, allowing for some turning to be done so the car can get into a slide. In this maneuver, the driver turns the car slightly in the opposite direction of the corner before quickly turning it in towards the corner. The act of quickly turning the car from one direction to another creates a weight transfer that results in a pendulum effect, where the rear of the car swings out more than the front, creating a slide which the driver can use to both slow the car down and enter the turn. In addition to the racing, Initial D's popularity is also attributed to its cars, or rather, Initial D helped to popularize the cars. Just like the racing tactics, a lot of the car choices are based off of the Japanese toge scene. The cars most commonly seen are from domestic Japanese cars from the likes of Honda, Nissan, Mitsubishi, Subaru, Toyota, and Mazda. Because of their relatively low prices, aftermarket support, and handling, these cars became really popular among the toge scene. A major reason why these cars also became popular is also because the anime breathed character into them by tying drivers to them. For instance, Shingo is most commonly characterized by his car, the Honda Civic EG6, or Takumi with his AE86, or Ryosuke Takahashi with his FC3S. Now let's look at some of the cars used in Initial D. So we start with the Toyota Corolla, Sprinter Terreno, and Corolla 11, also known by the model codes AE86 and AE85. This is basically the poster car for Initial D, being Takumi Fujiwara's main car. It's also the most common car, with 6 of them appearing, 586s and 185. The 86 is basically the performance version of the 85, coming with a 4 AGE, which is a dual overhead cam inline 4, stiffer suspension and chassis, and sportier interior trim. Well, to be honest, even with the sport upgrades, this car is not really even that fast or special on its own. I mean, it's just an 80s Corolla that's rear-wheel drive. But thanks to the anime, it's been hyped up to a mythical status. So now you have people paying like $30,000 for it 40 years later. Like seriously, you could have bought a GR86 with that. Or a used Tesla. Yes, exactly. You could buy a used Tesla and actually save money on gas. But now you're stuck with an 80s Corolla with no ABS, no airbags. You're probably gonna die maybe crash. Yeah, there's no airbags, man, dude. They weren't standardized until like later.
Oh shoot. Yeah, it was like 1983,
but
right?
you do have if you buy it in America, you do get a 5-mile-an-hour rated bumper which sticks out a half a mile.
What?
It's the car thing.
Okay.
So what it does lack in speed, it sure as hell makes up for in handling. Since this car is so small and simple, it's really, really light, okay? I mean, it's no Lotus Elise, but it's pretty close as it weighs only 2,000 pounds. Okay, that's 900 kilograms for people who are on the other side of the world. Coupled with rear-wheel drive and a 51-49 weight distribution, and you have a pretty nimble and peppy car. After you do like some weight reduction, stiffening of the suspension, and adding much needed power, you pretty much have yourself a pretty capable race car. That's why the 86 is used a lot in motorsports and toge and drifting and rally. Now, actually, fun fact, Takumi's 86 is actually based on the Offer's 86 and Kiichi Tsuchiya's 86, which, if you don't know, Tsuchiya became known as the Drift King after he mastered the art of drifting and helped popularize it by releasing multiple tapes of him drifting his 86 on toge roads. These tapes became really popular and also helped to inspire Initial D. Now, from the Toyota Corolla, we move on to Honda's equivalent, the Honda Civic. Civics have different model names and generations apparent in Initial D, with the EG6 and EK9 being the most notable, as they are driven by Shingo, Daiki, and Tomoyuki. We're going to be looking at these two generations of Civic, the EG6 and the EK9. What sets them apart from other cars in the anime is that they're the only front-wheel drive cars. Actually, the only front-wheel drive cars are the Civic and the Integra. Usually, front-wheel drive is seen as bad for racing because it causes the front wheels to do all the accelerating, braking, and steering. But with the right driving technique and suspension setup, a front-wheel drive car could be just as fast or even faster than a rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive car. Case in point, kit cars versus WRC cars. With the Civic and Integra, they can be really quick on corners. What helps them corner so well and just be all-around fast and nimble is their lightweight and suspension setup. From the factory, the EG6 SIR, which stands for Sport Injection Racing, and the EK9 Type R have increased power output and sportier suspension. EK9 actually has a lower weight thanks to weight reduction from like the removal of sound deadening and other interior components. In addition to these factory fittings, the Civic also boasts a vast aftermarket and is very easy to modify. All of these factors, lightness, cheapness, and vast aftermarket, make the Civic really common in really any type of racing. I mean, you can find them on the track, on the streets, on the dirt, even on the strip. You can really turn a Civic into anything, really. Now, so far we've been looking at normal cars that can be modified to become sporty. Now we're going to take a look at the dedicated sports car, specifically one from Mazda. This is the RX-7. Like a normal sports car, the RX-7 is rear-wheel drive, has sporty handling characteristics, is light, and powerful. It appears 4 times in the anime, excluding the one for the music video, most notably being the car choice for the Takahashi brothers. Keisuke Takahashi drives an FD3S, while his brother Ryosuke Takahashi drives an FC3S. What makes the RX-7 so unique from other cars is its engine. Unlike a conventional engine which uses pistons to generate power, the RX-7s use something called a Wankel rotary engine, technically called a Wankel engine, which uses a triangular-shaped rotor which spins around to do the combustion process. Mazda actually won Le Mans back in 1991 using a rotary-powered 787B by ironically managing better reliability than everyone else. While this engine is unique and promises to be more powerful while using less components, there's a reason why no cars today use a Wankel. These things are highly fuel inefficient, have high emissions, unreliable, and consume oil like there's no tomorrow. Nonetheless, this does not deter the RX-7 from being used in all sorts of racing because of its aforementioned sporty attributes. In the anime, it's also kind of like the 886 where it carries a mythical status, with the Takahashi brothers basically beating everything except the 86 because Takumi has thicker plot armor. I think this mythical status kind of makes more sense though, since the RX-7 is a sports car compared to the Corolla, which is not. But I think there's some fights where they kind of win just based on just plot armor. Moving on from the RX-7, we move on to the S chassis. This comprises of both the 180SX and the Silvias. So, and just before we start, I want to mention that this car has so many names. Okay, in Japan, the hatch is called the 180SX, and the coupe is called the Silvia. In America, they're both called the 240SX. In Europe and the rest of the world, it's called the 200SX. So just to get that clear, this car has lots of names. So we're going to be starting with the 180SX, okay? Two of them appear in the anime, driven by Kenji, and probably most notably by Mako Sato. Mako's 180SX is unique since it's commonly referred to as a Sil80, which means that it's a 180SX with the front end from an S13 Silvia. Now, this was never a factory option, except for one time when Nissan gave 500 180SXs to a tuning company named Kid's Heart and sold them in Nissan dealerships as Sil80s. Those are the only official ones, but they're really rare, and it's kind of hard to figure out which one's legit and which one's not, since you can fake your car to make it look like a official Sil80. Now, the reason people do this to their 180SXs is because when you wreck the front of a 180SX, it's actually cheaper to swap in an S13 front rather than to properly repair and replace the 180SX, because there's no pop-up headlights, so it's less components and less electricity and less wiring. Now, you may also be wondering if the other way goes around, where you swap in a 180SX front onto a Silvia, and yes, this does happen. These are called 1Vias. They're a bit rarer though, since it requires you to swap in a more expensive front, which makes no financial sense, so most people just do it mainly for aesthetics. Now, the Silvia is just like a coupe version of the 180SX. So if it has the hatch, the Silvia doesn't have the hatch, and it has fixed headlights, unlike the 180SX. Now, the S chassis as a whole is light and nimble like a sports car, and they're also easily modifiable and cheap, at least before everyone started wrecking them and demand went up. Now, I would say in the anime, this car is like a realistic rendition of the 886, where it doesn't have plot armor in most cases. I mean, I think there's some races where there's plot armor protecting the car, and the car like kind of just wins just because it's driven by a main character. But I think all in all, it's kind of just more realistic and just more how it probably would be if these cars were to race in real life. And also, it's kind of like a background car because there's like so many of them. Now, moving on for the S chassis, we have what is probably the most quintessential JDM car that every 10-year-old kid fanboys over. It's the Skyline GTR. This is Nissan's Halo car that took on the world and won. Now, fun fact, did you know that there's not a single R33 anywhere in the anime? Like, there's two BNR 32s, a BNR 34, and an ER 34, but there's no R33 of any kind of like no BCR 33, no ER 33, no HR 33. It only gets mentioned once by Godfoot, who says it's worse than an R32. While I can't really find I wasn't able to find a clearly stated reason, it would be safe to assume that because the R33 is the least liked of the three Skylines. It's like a middle step in the evolution of the Skylines, it's like the middle child. Now, the R32, being the oldest of the Skylines, is the lightest and simplest of the three. The R34, being the newest, is the heaviest but has all the advancements of 90s technology and learnings from previous generations. This makes the R33 being stuck in the middle. It's better than the R32 in some ways, but worse than the R34 in basically every way. Plus, lots of people say it looks ugly, but I disagree. Anyway, I'm getting distracted, back on the Skylines. Now, the 886 and the Civic and the RX-7 and the S chassis cars are all light and nimble cars weighing in at under 3,000 pounds. The Skylines are opposite of that, being heavy advanced cars weighing about 3,000 pounds, which is 1,360 kilograms. but don't think that the Skylines are just heavy boats, because they're still really nimble and fast. Now the Skylines have an all-wheel drive system called ATESA, which stands for Advanced Total Traction Engineering System for All-Terrain, which adjusts how much power to send to the front and rear wheels to maximize grip and reduce understeer. On top of the ATESA system, Skylines also have an all-wheel steering system called HiCAS, which stands for High Capacity Actively Controlled Steering. This steers the rear wheels to give even better cornering ability since all the wheels are now turning. Now, all of these systems use sensors that send data to the ECU to tell the car how to act accordingly. In addition to all of this, the Skylines also make quote-unquote 276 horsepower according to Nissan to abide by the unofficial gentleman's agreement of keeping Japanese cars below 276. Although, according to some, the cars do make above 276, like up to 280, up to 290. Some people get to 200 to 300, but that's probably with some modifications. Now, because it makes 276, it pretty much ties every Japanese sports cars from 1989 to 2004, because that's when the gentleman's agreement was still a thing. Now, the end result of all of this is a slightly heavy, but really sophisticated and powerful car. On the track, this car dominated close to everything. I mean, it's called Godzilla for a reason. So much so that in 1991, it was banned from competing in the Australian Touring Car Championship after the rules were changed to forbid any turbocharged cars. And fun fact, the Godzilla name that the Skyline is so commonly associated with actually comes from Australia, as the Australian broadcasters would nickname the car Godzilla for how it would destroy everything in the competition, just like how, the Godzilla monster destroyed everything in the city. So that's why I think it makes total sense for the car to be completely destroyed in the anime. I mean, like, literally, this car, I don't think there's a single race where this car wins against anything. I mean, like, I know it's heavy and stuff, but, like, really, man, like, come on. Like, I mean, like, come on, can't have, like, just win one race? It does win one race, though. It's a race between two R32, so, yeah. Anyway, this concludes my list of some cars in Initial D. Now, you're probably screaming at me right now, asking me why I didn't talk about X car, or this car, or the Evo, or the Supra, or the Impreza, or the Integra. And well, my answer to that is really just time, okay? I just picked some cars which I felt were either common enough in Toge, or the racing scene, or important enough to the story. And
you might do a video on it. You might, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I might do a video if I feel like it. And but yeah. And so this concludes my time. So I'm gonna get off the stage right now and to give it back to Neko.
Let's go. Oh shoot! I dropped my pretzel.
Oh really?
Yeah. Oops. Sorry. Okay. Yo guys, what's up, gang? There is one other thing I just wanted to add on the side, which is that I think the way that the driving in general is depicted is in this. It makes it a lot more fun to watch than, at least for like both ground level, I guess, consumers, like people who are like stupid like me, and then the upper level people who are like smart about cars. I think it brings this interesting life to driving that's makes it a lot more engaging. And I just really, like, as I mentioned earlier, the animation and the way that driving is animated is just so well done. And I think I just really wanted to talk about that. Because it's just something that I guess really made it more memorable, especially the later stages, the way that they use effects to drive, like emphasize things, or like the way that they'll show brake lights sometimes. I think it's just absolutely great. And I think it's something that should definitely be mentioned, that helps not only make the driving feel realistic, but also make the driving feel fun and engaging. And I think that's something that's very important, because if it was like, if you're watching NASCAR, you can at least make it, like, if you're watching NASCAR, it'd be boring, but then you add the effects and it's like way cooler. Because like then it's like they're going around in circles, but there's like flashing lights. But of course, that's beside the point. I'm gonna talk now about Eurobeat, so yeah. Now, the next section I'd like to really kind of talk about here is Eurobeat, an entire section dedicated to just the music alone. Now, to those who might not know what Eurobeat is, it's basically just a mix of pop, trance, and techno, and mainly started around Italy and France, that kind of area. And if I remember correctly, like, if that's mainly why, if you've ever listened to Eurobeat, a lot of things sound kind of weird, like the vocals sound weird. It's because it's just accents and stuff, so that's at least a little part of a little fun fact. And now a lot of the songs from Initial D, such as like Running in the 90s, Deja Vu, Night of Fire, Gas Gas Gas, I guess Max Power, according to some people apparently, would be memed a lot by people in like early 2010s, early internet culture, and then sort of died out, and then came back with Oshinoko, the idol meme or whatever. Anyways, the thing about Initial D though is that it's the only racing show, except MF Ghost, which I'll talk about later, as mentioned by MSV Videos, as mentioned by MSV Videos. You know, I think it's I've never seen any other media use Eurobeat, like any show or movie, I think, it's really weird. And for whatever reason though, Eurobeat just works very well with driving, at least when you think about like Initial D and then you like try it in real life. I can't tell you why, but it just perfectly works with street racing, drifting, or just normal ass driving, and something about it just works very well.
Maybe tonight you will open your heavens door and you'll realize again how much I love you, man. Maybe tonight you will even be more and more, and you'll be glad to get I will be close to you.
Yeah, anyways, I hope you didn't mind my epic cover of Maybe Tonight by Norma Sheffield, I believe. Interestingly though, the only reason that Eurobeat was ever actually used is because Avex, the company that produced Initial D, didn't know what music to use for the show, and they just happened to have a bunch of like licensed Eurobeat at the time, and so they took the two together, driving, Eurobeat, and then they made a really good mix. And interestingly, also, I feel like over time, Eurobeat has changed a lot, and the best way to see it is in the show's stages themselves. In the first stage, Eurobeat feels so strangely simplistic instrumentally, and it's very simple. You have like low, quieter kicks, and a lot of, and then you compare it to like the later one, like, you know, stage 5 for example, and it just sounds more complex. I don't know how to explain it, but if you actually go and listen to it for yourself, like if you listen, compare, and like contrast all of these like different Eurobeat, like I guess stages, like early to new, it just sounds so different. And I like both ends, by the way. I like old and new Eurobeat. They both have their unique sounds and unique aspects. However, I don't think anything will beat how special the first stage Eurobeat like tracks truly are, with the song choices and overall just sound of it all. And I think what makes Eurobeat so special too is that it just makes your driving better, and it's just always very memorable for as long and as boring as it might be sometimes. I don't know why. I think it's just maybe the way that it flows and how it sounds when you're driving. I mean, again, the thing is that, as I mentioned earlier, there's like accents, and some things just straight up don't make sense. Like if you listen to Golden Age, the song about it's like I think a song about the future, and it's like really weird when you look at the song lyrically, but the song slaps. He literally talks about like Medicare or something like that in it. It's very strange. And I think the only thing that could have beat, I guess, Eurobeat, or maybe even gotten like close, is Ridge Racer 4 OST, which, as you know, as we've gone over, it's a certified banger. It's such a banger that it was used in the song Bald by JPEG Mafia, and then Kota Takahashi like commented on it. And yeah, if you don't know, my brother likes JPEG Mafia, so I thought I'd just mention it. And I only know about it because of that. But anyways, you get the point about Eurobeat. Let's move on to the story. I'd also like to take a bit of time here to talk about the story as well. In the background of all the racing stuff, there's a lot of like teenage drama, not just even teenage drama, just drama in general. And part of it is intertwined with the racing and stuff, and I actually kind of really like the story because it's very engaging to see the balance between love and racing and all that kind of stuff. Not to mention Keisuke, and how he literally is like, I love racing so much, I don't even need a girlfriend. And it's like, damn bro, you asexual or something? Man, early representation so fire. Anything. Like another fun thing, you know, is like Takumi is shown in this as this like unstoppable force, even though his victories can be complete bullshit sometimes. S2000, y'all know what I'm talking about. And you know, I just don't. It's like very interesting because I don't know how it's so fascinating to just watch someone adapt so quickly to these like insane scenarios. For example, his fight against Shingo, and how he was like he was pit against this fight, and he could only use one arm essentially, or you know, the gum tape deathmatch, and his ability to adapt to something that is normally very, very hard to get used to. I just really like that. And I also really like how they actually, like, I guess this is very rare for things back then, but they had female representation with regards to racing and the toge scene, specifically with the Usui fight, when it's Takumi against the two girls in the Still 80, Mako and Sayuki, whatever it was, I forgot, sorry. And they're a force to be reckoned with, and they put up a very, very good fight, and they barely lose. It's only at the very end when they lost with the 90-degree drift or whatever. And it's always just kind of nice to see these things as far back as like the 90s and 2000s. And I remember I saw it as a kid, and I was like, you know, I want to be like that. That's cool. That's fire. I don't care if they're girls. I want to be like that, with me and my brother going, you know, it's just things like that. And I think apparently this was a bigger moment for women, I guess, in the racing scene, according to some, and apparently many women were just very happy that there was some kind of female representation in this space, and that they were being shown as like a positive light, because, you know, there's a stigma that women drive bad. That's very common. And, you know, the thing is that this Usui fight isn't like the first time they do, or like it's not the only time they do women, like they don't do like female representation. They do it as well with Keisuke's crush, as I mentioned earlier, when like when he's like, you know, I don't need a girlfriend. When Keisuke's crush is like driving, you know, it's a good fight and has this really adorable story. I'll go into it later, and it's kind of tragic, but I actually really liked it. And I just really wanted to talk about the story and, like, I guess impact, I guess, with like female representation in driving as well. And I just really wanted to take some time to talk about that. Now, the final thing I wanted to touch upon is actually the sequel to Initial D, MF Ghost. MF Ghost is basically like the grown-up version of Initial D, and rather than being super flashy with all the crazy effects and the low frame rate thing, and being more dramatic, it's realistic and follows more of a like realistic racing style. As someone mentioned at rudely earlier, very loudly, you know, with their very loud statements about how it was, yes, it's basically legally sanctioned racing, okay, whatever. And a lot of people have debated on whether or not this is better than Initial D, and I wanted to personally chime in on this, considering we just spent all this time talking about Initial D, so yeah. Personally, I feel like it's not worse for the most part. It's just catering to a different audience and sticks to the present rather than the past. You see, Initial D was a lot more of like a racing anime that everyone could get into, because like Initial D was just like this crazy fun thing that everyone could get into. I remember I was watching it with my family at one point, and because of Initial D, a lot of people got into cars because of that. Then those people who got into cars grew up and liked more realistic things. And then MF Ghost came out, and because it was less dramatic and super insane and stuff, and focuses on actual real racing, which is, you know, which started to happen in later like Initial D stages, it kind of appealed to that group, the people who grew up watching Initial D and then got into cars and all that sort of stuff. I mean, if you look at how the cinematography is, or just anything about it, or especially the car selection, actually, it's more modern rather than underground, and it's all about fancy schmancy rich people cars. I would rescind my statement about cinematography. I think the cinematography still feels kind of Initial D-ish, but it's definitely, they have a lot more wide shots. They're not tight. You don't have the infinite corners. Rather, you have like more like infinite straightaways. Funny enough. Yeah. And I think, you know, honestly, it's fine to have like this transition to a more mature, I guess, racing format, I guess. And I really like how it actually kind of like, it matures, it doesn't mature like just the racing part, but it matures the people as well. For example, Ryosuke, he goes from like this analytical and precise person who drives and drifts with like a lot of science, I guess, and he moves on and becomes like a surgeon, which honestly makes perfect sense, and I really like that. Or his once very cocky brother Keisuke, and he goes into business, which, you know, makes perfect sense. You know, all the cocky people go into business. And I like how these things are perfectly like carried on from Initial D, I guess, except their faces, which perfectly segues into what I want to talk about next. The art in both the manga and the anime. Now, in the anime, I really liked how it perfectly encapsulated the art style of the manga and the way that the characters were represented in Initial D, the really cool low frame rate parts and all that. You already know what I'm talking about. We went over this, I talked about it for a little bit. However, I feel that there are quite a few things that MF Ghost that did some things very interesting. First and foremost, remember Ryosuke, the suave and handsome, quiet guy? Well, this is him now. Apparently 20 years in the future, his body shape did not change, but his face, he looks like a skinwalker. He is scary. MF Ghost did him dirty. They don't even show his face in the anime, probably because it's very scary. And look at Kanata, the main character, the Takumi of this one. He looks like a skinwalker. He's gonna show up in my closet, bro. Shivers. Shiver me timbers. Thank God they prettied up everyone a bit more for the anime. You know, they definitely gave everyone some makeup from the manga. And you know, speaking of which though, I will say, I guess this is a personal thing, but quite frankly, I do not care about fan service. So seeing like a bunch of underage girls essentially in underwear spreading their ass cheeks for the camera, like I don't care, bro. I don't care. I mean, they never really did it in Initial D, and when they did it, at least it had a kind of a purpose. I like, you know, when Mogi is at the beach with Takumi, or like when they do like the brief panty shot, like, yeah, it was kind of weird because they're still underage girls, but they're not spreading your cheeks for the they're not spreading their cheeks for the camera. Well, I just really did not care that they were essentially jingling keys in front of my face with underage booty cheeks. Like I don't care. And another thing about the art though is that I just really missed like the cool low frame rate thing that they did for Initial D Legend stage. You probably saw, I probably put it up on screen, and they even did it when hyping up MF Ghost with an advertisement like for the GR86, and I thought it perfectly encapsulated the manga with Initial D, and I thought it would have looked awesome for, you know, MF Ghost with the drifting and high speed moments. I thought it would have been just awesome. Because the thing is that it's not like the manga like looks different, and so they're adapting to that. I think the manga looks relatively similar to Initial D, with the exception of their faces, I guess. But you know, I think they could have totally done that, and I think it would have just looked really stylistic and definitely stood out a lot more. Because right now it just feels kind of like Stage 5 and 4, which is fine, except for the fact that it just doesn't have the same thing that Stage 5 and 4 had, which was like the cool flashy effects. I think like, you know, one moment they could totally do it for is like the freaking sidewalk maneuver thing, which is meant to be Takumi's gutter run or ditch hook, or like ditch unhook, I don't know, because he goes up instead, which I think, you know, also just in general is another really cute thing that carries like the torch from Takumi to Kanata very well. And this, it's like weirdly cute. But if they did like the low frame rate for these like epic moments the same way they did for Legend, and just in Legend in general, I think it just would have looked a lot cooler. Another thing I really also wanted to mention is like the story from what I heard is far less, well, I guess like relatable or compelling. I don't know how to put it. Like for example, Initial D, you follow like these normal people. These are people with probably day jobs. They are not racing full time, and in that way they're kind of relatable. Having to deal with struggles like if you crash your car, it's coming out of your pocket, not your rich dad or your goddamn sponsor. Like, you know, that's relatable. That's something we can relate to. Car crashes, I can. I don't want to talk about it though. And I think like another really cool thing, they like, you know, how like they kind of have like it's still illegal racing in Initial D, and so because of that, like if you also crash, you can't go and call up the freaking the racing association and say I got screwed over by these people, because the racing association is the police and they're gonna probably jail you if you tell them. So yeah, and I also will say, I think like there are certain things that were just very fun to watch, at least very interesting racing story, because like the racing in Initial D, you get to follow, when I mentioned the racing is intertwined with the story with Initial D, there are a lot of really cool examples of that. For example, the time that Keisuke, again, I'm gonna mention this like for the third time, is racing his crush, which is adorable and stuff, but like the idea of trying to get the recognition of someone that you like a lot is something that is relatable and is what made that specific race so special, and it just made that one just stand out a lot more. And also the fact that it was relatable because you were wondering why the single turbo is faster than your twin turbo, but whatever. And I also will say that the Eurobeat in MF Ghost hits a little less hard, but that's not really MF Ghost's fault, because even the later stages of Initial D cannot get as close as like the peak of Initial D, which is stage 1. Like every song from stage 1 by Leslie Parrish, for example, is a masterpiece. Like Save Me, the Save Me scene is so fire, bro. She's the GOAT. Anything past stage 2 and it kind of gets less iconic more and more, but except whenever Move does their like OP and EP, you know, that's always really good. I will say though, for one thing with MF Ghost, it's like you could have done the Bunta story, you know, we've been waiting for that, right? We've been waiting like to see his backstory, because he knows his Tsuchiya, right? He knows like the freaking GOAT of actual driving, like the Drift King himself, and we want to know like that story. It would have been so cool. But that's not really their fault. I mean, if they want to continue in the future, that's totally cool, because I think it's still good. I just don't think that it will ever reach the hype of Initial D, mainly because, again, reaches a different audience, and also just artistically, I feel like it's a little less cool. But I still think it's great, and I think you should still totally check it out. There's probably like a free website. There's a free website I use, but they're not sponsoring me, so I'm not going to tell you. So yeah. Anyways, before I end this video, I still want to give yet again another massive shout out to MSV Idios. Without him, this video would have been like far less interesting in general, and he's like the backbone of this video. All of the footage, or at least a lot of it, that you've seen in the background and all of the cool examples you've probably seen, he probably made and recommended, or, you know, gave me, and I could not have done this video without him. I mean, he did not a whole recreation of God Hand, but like the God Hand fight from the Initial D, you know, stage, what was it, like 4-3, and a recreation of like an MF Ghost scene where I do overshoots the turn, which I actually do plan to use at least somewhere else. I think it would be kind of fun. And yeah, again, massive shout out. I think you should check his channel out. He does like a lot of really random stuff. You do like the weirdest thing. You know, a lot of
I do whatever like pops up in my head.
Yeah,
this could work for a YouTube video.
Yeah, okay, but like I bet he might make more car content. Who knows? You might. Maybe.
BMG's so saturated with like clickbait stuff, so.
Well, you don't have to do BMG. You can talk about like cars.
Like, I guess so. I was planning like a slick talk, like light bars versus no light bars video.
Yeah, okay. Check out his light bars versus no light bars video.
I may or may not make it.
Okay, but in general, like he might do car stuff. So if you're actually interested in maybe car stuff, he's cool. You know, give him support, subscribe, get him to like 1,000 subscribers. That would be funny, because then he can make money.
I gotta get to 500.
Yeah, get him to 500. But anyways, that's about it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will probably see you tomorrow or whenever I make another video, where it will probably be about something. I don't know, maybe post Void. I don't know. All right.
TF2 video.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing the TF2, bro. Okay, maybe. Okay, maybe. Okay. Bye.
ダブルクラッシュと行こうぜ